Hola y bienvenidos. Hello and welcome to Street Smart Travel. Steve here, still on the farm up north in Talipe, Ecuador. And I've got a few requests to do, let's call it an origin video, in which this time I will pay attention to the rule of three and answer three specific questions. 1. Who am I? 2. What brought me here? And 3. Why Ecuador? Now, 2 and 3 sound similar. What I mean by what brought me here is not physically to South America. What brought me to the point in my life where I wanted to leave the West and go to a different part of the world and had to start again, I guess. Yeah, so those are the three questions I'll address in this video. The first one, who am I? My name's Steve, born and raised in Toronto, Canada, or for those not from there, Toronto, Canada. It's still my home. It's been my home my entire life. I am a first-generation Canadian. My grandparents came from Europe, and my parents also were born in Europe and came to Canada as young children after the Second World War. It's a very common story for a lot of people in Canada. So my grandparents left their homeland, and my parents too, and came to Canada. And, at this point in my life, I see no future in Canada or the West in which I want any part. With that being the case, I decided to look for somewhere else to go. And I'd done a lot of traveling over the years, and that leads us to question number 2. What brought me here? To this point in my life, not to Ecuador. What brought me to the point in my life where I decided I wanted to leave the West and strike out somewhere on my own and start again? And I think that probably the seed for that was planted when I was a little kid in the 70s, 1970s. There was a show, and anybody that was alive at that time may or may not recall a show on television called In Search Of, that was hosted by Leonard Nimoy, also known as Mr. Spock from the original Star Trek TV series. And this was at a time when there were maybe 3 or 4 channels on TV. There wasn't 24-hour programming. There weren't hundreds of channels and 24 hours of, and on-demand this and that and whatever. There was a pretty limited universe of what you could watch. And if you weren't available to watch it when it was on, that was it, right? There's no TiVo, there's no, hey, I'm going to record this on my whatever recorder, VHS, or whatever people are using these days. So that show, I found that endlessly fascinating. Sorry about the dogs, they're kind of freaking out here. But the topics on that show, they would talk about unexplained mysteries and UFOs and ancient civilizations, ruins like Mayan ruins, Inca ruins, the pyramids in Egypt, the Bermuda Triangle, so all these things that, and paranormal activity, things like that. And because it was the 70s, there was no special effects, and you can still find those. If you look, I found some on YouTube, episodes of In Search Of, and it's pretty comical, just when you see how far things have progressed in terms of special effects and being able to tell a story, because back then, right, there was no technology to do that. So the content was a much more important, and that may have carried over to my idea for this channel too. As you can tell, it's not about production value. Obviously, I'm much more interested in the content at this point, and I'll up my game as I get some skills and learn how to edit and do different things. And but for now, I'm keeping it really simple, like In Search Of and other shows from my youth. I remember watching shows, and the ones that really appealed to me were when they were talking about ruins and ancient civilizations, especially in Central and South America. And keep in mind, too, this would have been the 70s, and this part of the world, South America and Central America, was a clown show in the 70s. Lots of conflicts, wars, and all kinds of military dictatorships, and the machismo of the leaders, and this and that. And like it was a pretty violent and unsettling place to be. And ironically enough, today I think it's one of the most peaceful regions on Earth, both of those, Central and South America. So that's probably where I got the travel bug. And then in my later 20s, after a couple brutal and painful life events, decided I just want to go out and travel and see the world. And there were two things that I was looking into. One was teach English as a second language. So I signed up for a course and got certified to do that. It was a post-grad course. I was the only person in that course that had not gone to university. And I was in a classroom with people that had, in some cases, multiple degrees from university. I jumped through some hoops and they said, yeah, you could probably hack this. I'm like, I know I can hack this, right? I didn't go to university because I'm not qualified to. I didn't go to university because it didn't interest me, and it still doesn't. It's just not my lane. I like to study things on my own, for my own purposes, as opposed to here's the curriculum and you have to follow what we tell you. Like, no, I'm not a big fan of rules, right? Probably goes back to my musician roots. So I had that as one option, and before that one came through, before I started looking for work teaching English in other parts of the world, I managed to get a gig working on cruise ships. And that for me was a much better fit, right? I was doing something I enjoyed much more than teaching English. And see if you can guess what that was. I will tell you I'm a musician, and I will invite you to guess what instrument you think I play. And let me point you out of the wrong direction. I am not a guitar player. Not guitar. I was on the ships from 1999 until 2014. I took a couple breaks in there. 2000, I was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, which almost killed me twice, and I couldn't take care of that on the ship, so I came back to Canada to get that sorted out. And then I went back to the ships after that. And in the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, I had gotten off the ships, I think, in 2006, and bought a bunch of rental real estate, most of which I still own, and manage from a distance, or manage the managers from a distance, let's say. And then went back to the ships when the economy was going south and the winter was coming, and like, I really don't want to be in Canada for the winter, and I've kind of had enough of being here, and I've bought these places, and I don't need to stay here right now. And I went out to the ships again, and it was awesome, right? That break really helped me get some perspective, and I really loved traveling around the world. We did a lot of Caribbean stuff. I did a bit of Europe, a bunch of Alaska. Before I was medically disembarked when I was sick, I was on a ship that was going to Hawaii. Still haven't been to Hawaii. That was in 2000. I got off the ship. Never went back to Hawaii. And I probably, if I were to go to Hawaii, it's not really on my bucket list right now, but if I were to go, it would be something I would do on my own time and not on a ship. Those things, in search of and traveling the world on cruise ships, really reinforced my wanderlust. I got off the ships in 2014 and went into the trades, did that for, I guess, 8 years, and then got injured and couldn't be on the tools anymore, and that kind of accelerated my plans. That and the lockdowns and all the nonsense that's gone on over the last few years really clarified for me what was important to me and what wasn't important to me, and staying in the West was not something I was interested in doing. And I had, like I said, I traveled around the world enough, and I already, also on the ships, I would take longer vacations. And if I couldn't get a longer vacation, I would make sure to go for at least a couple weeks a year, usually through Central America. But I did some longer trips, a couple months through Central America. I've been to every country in Central America multiple times, both on the ships and on my own, with the exception of El Salvador, because up until recently that was the murder capital of the world, and it didn't really sound like a place I wanted to vacation. And thanks to Bukele, now it is the safest country in the West, or the Western Hemisphere, I think it is. So, like him or hate him, right? That country's a much better place today because of the changes he's made. My first choice, in terms of a place where I would consider moving to, was Nicaragua. And I went to Nicaragua, I think it was in 2006, on my own, and then I met up with a girlfriend, and we traveled for a couple months after that in Costa Rica. She didn't want to go to Nicaragua, and I was hell-bent. I really want to see this place, because I'd been there on the ships, right? We were the first ship to ever go to San Juan del Sur in 1999, and I was just, this place is great. So I spent a couple weeks there, loved it, definitely on my radar, and during lockdowns I had a lot of time. I was still working because in the trades we were essential. I had the time to do some research and check out some places. I'm like, okay, Nicaragua, I don't like the politics anywhere in the West. I don't like the direction the West is heading in general. And I saw no future there of which I wanted any part. And Nicaragua, same thing. Politically, it's not a good situation, and certainly not one that I feel I can get behind. I wouldn't be happy. I'd be happy living there with, the people are great, the country is fantastic, there's so many things I love about it. But as long as Ortega's, the chief guy, then no. After he's gone, maybe I'll look into it. So this brings us to question number 3. Why Ecuador? This could be a much longer video on its own, but we're already at 11 minutes, so I'll keep this short and I'll do more on Ecuador as I go forward. Before the lockdowns, the last 2 trips I took were here to Ecuador. And I think I had 2.5 or 3 weeks on each trip. So it was enough time. It's a small country. It's easy to get around. And I saw enough of it to know, like, yeah, I love this place. And some of the chief reasons for that were the people are fantastic. Super friendly, super helpful. The food is unbelievably fresh and cheap. Fruits and vegetables in the markets taste the way they did when I was a kid. Right? GMOs are banned. This is a big one. GMOs are banned in their constitution. You cannot grow them here. Huge. I like a lot of the things I've seen with, let's say, indigenous peoples challenging oil companies and other international concerns and saying, no, this is our land, this isn't yours, you don't get to come here and steal this from us. We've seen what you guys do in other parts of the world, and you're not doing it to us. And they keep winning. These are not big, deep pocket organizations. These are indigenous people who are like, this is what we're doing, and you don't get to tell us how we live on our own lands. The weather here, I touched on the last video, and it varies quite a bit across the country, but the weather is certainly much better than a Canadian winter. Which, yeah, it's not a hard contest to win. There's a lot of things that are better than a Canadian winter. For me, right? If you're into snowmobiling and skiing, you probably love the winter. I don't. Yeah, and just the way I feel down here is fantastic. And because of my time on the ships, when I started, we were doing 6-month contracts, and that's how I schedule my time down here. Right, so I took an early retirement because I had set up multiple streams of income between my rental properties and other investments I have. I sold my condo at the peak of the real estate boom, I guess, in 2022, and came out of that with a substantial tax-free gain, which made it easy to come down here and do an investor visa and still have money parked on the side that if I get stuck, I can rely on that. So the short version is Ecuador checked all the important boxes for me. It's far from ideal. If you've watched any of the update videos I've done, we've got an ongoing state of emergency with the narcos. That's been since January of this year, 2024. Ongoing state of emergency with electricity. We're down to 8 hours, finally. It was 14 hours every day, blackouts, then it went to 12. Then some days it went off in the day and some days it didn't, regardless of what the schedule said. And right, huge forest fires raging across the country. And these issues are not just in Ecuador, they're all across the region, quite honestly. Water shortages, water rationing, and just a general sense of civil unrest in the cities. If you go online, it's not hard to find videos of people demonstrating in cities and fires and just people are not happy. And there's talk of a paro happening this week, a big strike. I don't know if it's going to be nationwide, but in Central and South America, when the people don't like what's going on, they do what's called a paro, which everybody just shuts down the country. have busloads of indigenous people coming in from the countryside, and they will literally sit on the Pan America Highway and other major roads and just stay there for as long as it takes for them to get the government's attention and say, you change this back to the way we want it, or we don't move, right? And your country comes to grinds to a halt. So I respect the people here because they respect themselves and their rights, and they're pushing back against big multinational foreign interests that want to subjugate them and take their natural resources, as has happened in many parts of the world, including Canada, and they're not having it. And that, right, that is exactly how I feel about it. Good for you. This is a country I can get behind. And like I said, I love the people here. I've been here 2 years, and I came here before to visit a couple times, and I've never had any issues with anybody. Nobody's stolen things from me. People, they try to overcharge you for things, gringo price you occasionally, but very, very rarely. Like, I think once that happened to me. So on balance, Ecuador checks all the major boxes that are important to me. And I could go on, but here we are. 16, yeah, let's call it at that. I'll elaborate on some of these things in other videos because this bleeds over into other things I want to talk about. So if you've made it this far, thank you. And if you've gotten some value from the video, please like, drop me a comment if you're so inclined, and subscribe to the channel. Still trying to grow the reach and get this out to a wider audience. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to see me talk about here, any questions specific to Ecuador or travel or life on cruise ships, or any of the things I mentioned in this video, shoot me a comment. Happy to elaborate on anything people want to hear about, as opposed to me just saying, hey, I feel like talking about this thing. Well, maybe people don't feel like listening to this thing. So with that, I will say happy trails. Thanks for listening. See you out on the road.